Welcome to Desperately Seeking the 80s. I am Meg.
And I'm Jessica. And Meg and I have been friends since 1982. We went to middle school and high school together here in New York City, where we still live.
And where we are podcasting about New York City in the 80s. I do rip from the headlines.
And I do pop culture.
And Jessica, I'm so excited about my story. I kind of just want to jump in, if that's okay with you.
Are you kidding? This is wonderful.
So we've lived in apartment buildings our entire lives because we have lived, well, actually, I lived in a townhouse growing up in the 80s, but you lived in an apartment building your whole life.
Yes.
I've certainly had issues with neighbors starting in the 90s, but I didn't have so much of a neighbor issue when I was younger. And I was wondering in the 80s if you or your parents ever had some apartment neighbor issues.
First off, the people who lived right across the hall from us wound up being like my grandparents.
Oh.
So Mully and Douglas Ryan, we did New Year's with them. We did Christmas with them. They were the people who introduced me to publishing. The best. And they both looked like they were straight out of the 1940s. Like they had never changed their look. And I've already told you about the kid from my class who lived all the way down the hall. Who I could hear him screaming with his mother.
I can't remember.
He had the speech impediment, and we made him sing "La La 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 La."
I don't think you've told me this. Should you tell me this?
I'll tell you. I'll tell you some other time. It was just kids are not nice. But anyway, so no, and everyone in the building. It was strange. At the same time, it was. All the parents were my parents' age, and there were tons of kids
that sounds
my
wonderful.
age and John's age. So it was actually really lovely.
Cool. All right. Well, my story today, my sources are Vanity Fair, page 6, Wikipedia.
Okay.
At the end of the iconic movie After Hours, about the horrors of getting lost in Soho, Paul Hackett, played by Griffin Dunne, is completely encased in paper mache, like a frozen mummy. When Martin Scorsese was filming this scene in the summer of 1984, Griffin Dunne indeed did have to hang out all day in a body cast with only a tiny breathing hole and 2 peepholes.
Wow.
All
That's
day.
Horrible.
It was also the summer. Can you imagine?
No, I cannot.
On that day, Marty had invited Ric Ocasek of the Cars. I used to say Ocasek. I just listened to a podcast and they said Ocasek, but I'm going to go with Ocasek.
What makes them right?
Okay, I agree. I always heard Ocasek, and then I was correcting myself. All right, I'm more comfortable with Ocasek. So Ric Ocasek.
Actually, I will tell you this. I have friends who were in a band that was managed and produced by Ric Ocasek, and they call him Ocasek.
Then that absolutely is legit.
Okay.
So he visits the set, and Marty introduces him to Griffin.
Who's in the cast.
Who is in the cast. The Cars was Griffin's, just happened to be his favorite band. So he's like beside himself.
Inside the cast.
Inside the cast. And Rick is chatting with him for a while in spite of the fact that Griffin Dunne cannot move or really be heard through the cast.
Oh my God.
The reason he was on the set was because he was thinking about writing a song for the movie, which I did a little bit of research. I don't believe he did end up writing a song for the movie. But he, at that time, was also living in a walk-up on on East 12th Street, close to Electric Lady Studios.
Oh, sure.
Where he was recording a new album, and that's on West 8th.
That's on St. Mark's.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
further west, between McDougal and 6th. And do you know who commissioned?
Wasn't it Jimi Hendrix?
It was indeed. You're great. And some of the people who recorded there, fancy people.
I mean, it's one of
Blondie,
the ultimate destination
Smith,
places.
David Bowie, yes.
Yes.
All great stuff. Oh, and to give some more just context for Ric Ocasek's life at that point, Heartbreak City, iconic album for the Cars, had just come out in March. So we are the summer. We're just a few months after Heartbreak City came out. Some of the songs on Heartbreak City you might think Magic, Drive, Hello Again.
So everything that had a video on MTV, every single had a video that went with it. So that was massive.
Massive. All right. So Griffin Dunne just happened to be looking for an apartment in New York. Griffin had grown up in Los Angeles, the son of Dominic Dunne and Ellen Dunne, and nephew of John Gregory Dunne and Joan Didion, who wrote The Year of Magical Thinking about her grief following her husband's death.
Well, and the documentary about her was done by Griffin Dunne.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Griffin's sister, Dominique Dunne,
Died.
Starred in Poltergeist. And the year the movie came out, which was 1982, so that's just 2 years before where we are right now in time, she was strangled to death in her LA driveway by her estranged boyfriend, John Sweeney. And because I just cannot escape this rabbit hole, I will just talk about this for a heartbeat, even though it's not the core of the story. Sweeney had been hounding her after their breakup, and their relationship was violent. You can see the bruises on her face caused by Sweeney in an episode of Hill Street Blues.
Wow.
Yep. When he showed up on her doorstep, he persuaded Dominique to talk to him outside. And her scene partner, David Packer, with whom she was running lines, heard them arguing, then smacking sounds, then 2 screams and a thud. He called police, but they said that the home wasn't in their jurisdiction.
What?
Yep. Packer left through the back door because he actually thought he was going to be killed. And he circled around front. And when he came out front, he saw Sweeney on top of Dominique. And she never gained consciousness. And she was taken off life support 5 days later. She was 22 years old.
Disgusting.
Ultimately, Sweeney was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and served 3 years and 7 months.
What?
Yeah. Tina Brown, who would go on to be editor of Vanity Fair, encouraged Dominic Dunne, who until this very moment had been a TV and movie producer, to keep a journal during the trial of his daughter's killer. And that ended up being Justice, a Father's Account of the Trial of His Daughter's Killer, which was featured in the March 1984 issue of Vanity Fair. So, March 1984. The spring before. We are right now in the summer of 1984. This is the spring right before. And that launched a second career for Dunne as a chronicler of crime and society. But again, here we are. The summer after that article came out. And Griffin Dunne
is in his body cast having Ric Ocasek talk at him.
And looking for an apartment in New York and trying to have a conversation with this man who he has
like this enormously tall man.
Describe Ric Ocasek.
He's over 6 feet tall, maybe 5 pounds. And he looked like a pencil with an Adam's apple.
And wore dark sunglasses.
He had dark spiky hair, big ears.
Really black hair. Yeah.
Was, with Paulina Poroskova.
Yes. Which we're getting to.
Oh,
okay. So Rick tells Griffin that there's an apartment available on the top floor of the apartment that he's living in. He and his new girlfriend, Paulina Poroskova, were living on the ground floor. Now, Rick was still married to his second wife, Suzanne. But when Paulina was hired as the lead in the video for the Cars song Drive,
that's how they met?
They fell hard for each other. Paulina was 19.
Oh, good Lord.
From Czechoslovakia, and already well on her way to becoming a supermodel. Oh, by the way, guess who directed the video of Drive? You are never going to get this, but it's crazy.
Tell me.
Timothy Hutton.
What? That is bizarre.
There you go.
Timothy Hutton, dark horse.
Earlier that year, Paulina had been 18, a model, fresh in the city. She'd been watching MTV and saw Ric Ocasek and fell for him on the spot.
Aw.
She described him as, quote, a combination of Mr. Spock, David Bowie, Jesus Christ, and Chopin. Just her type.
Well, that's very specific.
Quote, little did I know then that only a few months later that smile would be mine. It would be for me. It would be mine for 30 years.
Oh my good Lord.
I know. But that summer, their romance was new, and Griffin Dunne soon moved upstairs from them, delighted to have new friends in the city. Griffin said, quote, "I don't think I've ever seen a couple more in love than those two. They hung on each other's words and laughed uproariously over things an outsider couldn't possibly understand. They spoke a language all their own that made you feel like you were eavesdropping on dolphins."
Okay, that's a little fruity. Okay.
I think it's lovely.
Well, I'm in a little bit of a mood today.
You are.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to try not to be crusty. I'm going to be open.
Actually, no. I want you to lean into the crustiness because this is going to be kind of an interactive part of the story coming up.
All
and
right,
your
that's
crustiness will definitely come in handy. Because life in the apartment building wasn't all that blissful. In the first week after moving in, Griffin ran into the woman who lived between his apartment and Ric and Paulina. So Ric and Paulina are on the ground floor, Griffin's on the top floor, and there's a woman on the floor between them. As he was walking down the stairs, a short, frizzy-haired, angry woman blocked his way. And now, Jessica, we're going to do a little scene.
Oh my God, you have sides here.
Yes.
This is very cool.
Handed Jessica her script. You play angry woman.
Okay.
So again, we are on the stairs in this walk-up apartment on 12th Street. Angry woman says to Griffin Dunne,
"You left the fucking door open last night."
"I did?"
"You turned the bolts on the bottom 2 locks, but you didn't do the top one. How fucking hard can that be? Someone could have come in and killed my husband and I in our sleep."
I didn't realize.
You didn't realize. You people from Hollywood and that asshole rock star downstairs don't realize anything about anyone but yourselves. I have to put up with that Dick Ocasek leaving the door open and the paparazzi and groupies hanging out front. And now I have another selfish asshole risking my life."
Very well done. Thank you.
That was a catharsis. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, Griffin claims he never saw photographers or groupies outside the apartment, but there was no point arguing with the
Clearly, I wouldn't
angry
argue
woman
with Cuckoo Bird.
After that, he was sure to bolt the door behind him and tiptoe past the angry woman's apartment on his way up to the top floor. One day, he crept into his apartment, still a little rattled from the encounter with his neighbor, when he saw on the floor, in the middle of his living room, a single slice of individually wrapped Kraft cheese. Inside the plastic of this lone slice of cheese was a scrap of paper with a drawing of a skull and crossbones. When he removed the paper from inside the plastic of the cheese slice, he saw written,
"Get out of the building now. You have been warned." Oh, well, she's totally out of her fucking mind.
Right.
Okay.
So Griffin took the cheese and the threat
Who moved my cheese?
to Ric and Paulina's place and told them about what happened with the angry woman on the stairs. And Ric said, "Yeah, man, that lady's really crazy. It's gotta be her. How'd she get into your apartment?" Ric handed back the cheese and said, "You're going to have to confront her with this." But Griffin was scared shitless. So he didn't do anything about it for 2 days until he discovered another slice of cheese in the middle of his apartment.
Why is the vehicle of doom?
With
It's so
another drawing of a skull and crossbones and this note.
What are you still doing in the building? Get out now. This is your last warning.
So now
Good
Griffin
God.
is like shaking in terror. He goes back to Ric and Paulina. "This is bad," says Paulina. "That lady is one crazy bitch." Ric poured Griffin a vodka to help him get his courage up. Then Griffin went to the angry woman's apartment door with the cheese slices and knocked. Apparently she was cooking meatloaf and he could smell the meatloaf. But she didn't come to the door. So he went back to his place. And as he opened the door, he felt a breeze come in through the floor-to-ceiling sliding glass window that he kept open. It was summertime in New York. As he went to shut the window, he glanced down into the courtyard and saw Ric Ocasek tossing a slice of cheese aimed right at his open window, with Paulina Poroskova next to him, doubled over in hysterics.
They are so awful. Those shitheads.
So Griffin Dunne wrote this story for Vanity Fair on the occasion of Ric Ocasek's death. And I could, as an epilogue, talk about what happened after he died and everything with Paulina and all of that. But
let's not sully
the
moment.
Let's
because
not
at that
sully
moment, it was pure and hijinks born of love.
Exactly. Yeah. I was writing out sort of, the aftermath and everything. And I'm like, they were together for many, many years. They had two beautiful sons, Jonathan and Oliver. It didn't end great, but it was great for quite a while.
And that's relationships for you. But I love that. What jerks. Isn't that the perfect encapsulation of how the people who will be the biggest jerks to you usually are your friends? It's just like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's irresistible when oh my God, this is the thing that will drive this person out of their mind.
I think it's so
and
funny.
I am now going to and what an arm on him that he could get a slice of cheese.
It's true.
Up three stories.
Floors. Yeah.
That's really good. That's impressive.
Good aimed.
But it also explains the cheese because that can really travel like a Frisbee.
So instead of having a paper airplane, he was just like, well, we've got this. This will give it more momentum.
Yeah, it's quite brilliant in a way. And if he wasn't trying to show off for his new girlfriend,
his 19-year-old girlfriend.
Exactly. That is really. And so how old was Ric Ocasek at this point? Is he in his 30s?
39.
39. Okay. And Griffin Dunne is like in his late 20s.
Yeah, exactly. He's 29.
Oh, what a bunch of morons. That's really beautiful. Although the lady in the middle apartment really was a nutball.
Yeah. Oh, no, that was awful.
But she wasn't actually trying to off him.
Right. She wasn't psychotic. She wasn't a psycho killer.
Oh, man. No, that's pretty. Actually, I did have a crazy neighbor once. I moved to Williamsburg in 1999 with my husband, Anthony. And we lived in a building that was one story. It had been a glass factory. It was this amazing.
Sounds cool.
It was very cool. There were no windows to the street because it was just this one. We were on the ground floor and it had glass bricks. And instead, there were 6 gigantic skylights.
Okay.
And it was like the space was like 1,200 square feet. It was insane. But the space had been split in 2. There was another side. So when you walked in, you're in this little vestibule and you could go to the door on the right or the door on the left. I was the door on the right. The door on the left was a lunatic, an absolute lunatic named Bernd, B-E-R-N-D, Naber, N-A-B-E-R. He was German, purportedly had been, a hanger-on at the factory. He only wore white. His glasses were white. He painted his bicycle white.
Was he
Everything
an artist?
Was white. He was an artist and he had these gigantic canvases and he would paint layers and layers and layers of paint and then use a sandblaster to get through to the different layers and what have you. The sandblaster, the music, and the girls. And he was old. He must have been in his 60s. And I remember one time I was just like, this fucking guy and this music. And I was banging on his door.
Oh, dear.
And I'm not joking. It was like something out of Absolutely Fabulous. He fell out of his own apartment with 2 20-something girls hanging on him. He had paint all over him and was like, it wasn't the matter. I was like, you are. But the problem was I couldn't really get too saucy with him because I was subletting from him. He was my landlord.
Oh, yeah. No, you can't complain to your landlord.
I was just like, Oh God, Barrett, just don't get high tonight, okay? Like I have something to do tomorrow. Could you just like keep it down a little?
Barrett.
No, it was like something out of After Hours. He
It
really was.
Actually sounds very much like After Hours.
And his side of the space was like double the size of mine, but mine was finished very nicely. His, and by the way, all white. It looked like my apartment was like walking onto the set of 2001. His apartment had no upgrade to it at all. It would basically look like a garage and had all of his painting stuff and equipment all around and a mattress on the floor.
Oh.
And I was like, you're really working hard, man, to like
right.
get the right vibe, aren't you? So when you get your 20-something chicks back from the bar, they're like, it's for real. Anyway, he was a real banana and could be really sweet, but such a pain in the ass. So that
I wonder if we could look up his artwork and post it.
I'm going to look right now
Barrett.
and see what I can find for Barrett. Immediately what comes up when I start typing that in is Bergdorf Goodman, which tells you a lot about me. Bernd Nauber, what do we have here? Yes, artist. Here he is. Look, here he is.
Oh my God. He's very white.
Yes.
So did you like the interactive quality?
Oh my gosh, I loved it. I haven't done scene work in a very long time. Ooh. It was marvelous.
I'll try.
And that was a cold
some
reading. I could do better. I can do better. That was cold.
Look, you were typecast.
Hey. Hey, why I oughta. Why I oughta. Hi. Okay. Although it is rare, I have an engagement question for you today.
Okay.
All right. When you were a kid, after the age of, let's say, 11.
Okay.
So when you were tween.
Yes.
And older. What was your favorite TV show?
Dallas.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I loved the drama.
I never got into any of the soap operas, daytime or nighttime.
Also, I grew up in Austin, Texas, until I moved to New York when I was 7. So I think it might have been a little bit like, oh, I miss Texas.
Like you felt like the Ewings were your family?
No, just I think it was filmed. Why do I think it was filmed? At the time, I think I thought it was filmed in Texas.
Interesting.
Probably.
Well, funny enough, there's a tie-in to what you liked to watch today. Although I did not know that and did not expect it.
Who Shot JR? No spoilers. I bet you don't even know who shot JR.
I didn't watch any of it.
That was a big
deal. I know who shot Mr. Burns on The Simpsons, which was their parody of it.
Who shot Mr. Burns on The Simpsons?
Baby Maggie.
Yeah, no correlation.
No. When I was still at Fleming, so it must have been around 1980 and 1981, the boys in the class were always talking and obsessed about what they had watched on Saturday Night Live. That weekend. And, I sort of felt the same way about it as I did about Monty Python.
Yeah.
Like, I liked it. It was fun, but I didn't need to repeat every single thing that was said.
And honestly, in those days in particular, it was very bro-y.
Indeed it was. It was super bro-y. And stayed super bro-y for a really long time. What I really, really loved was before Saturday Night Live, and no one called it SNL.
No. When did that start? I still won't do that. No. I think it's silly.
No, but the lineup was very important to me because did your parents go out a lot at night?
I'm not sure.
Were you left?
I mean, my brother was older, so I don't even know. I don't know if I really noticed.
Well, my parents went out and John was there to look after me.
Yeah.
And the excitement of Saturday night was the Love Boat Fantasy Island lineup. I
love those shows.
That then slid right into Saturday Night Live.
Fair enough. And I will say about Love Boat and Fantasy Island, which I loved. love.
I mean, if you didn't love them, there was something dramatically. I mean,
Such
Aaron's spelling genius.
Quality television.
Yeah.
There's just no way to improve on that.
No, it was ideal. And if you ever need to know who the real stars of yesteryear were at the time, who was big in the 30s and 40s, just look at the guest stars. All you have to do is go on Wikipedia and find a list of all of the guest stars.
Oh my God.
From The Love Boat. And it's like Milton Berle. And if she had been alive, Lupe Velez.
But they also did current people. Like they would have people who were on.
I was very, very excited that
stuff.
they had Scott Baio on. And
sure.
it was Scott Baio and Christy McNichol, I think, on the same show.
That's exciting.
Yes, it was a thrill.
My father thought it was trashy.
Of course he would.
So the only time I got to watch it was, in fact, when they were not in the house. So yes, they must have been going out, to answer your first question.
There you go.
Because there's no way that I would have been allowed to watch that. And I definitely watched it.
It was truly a slice of heaven, even though it was the same thing every time. It was like, people reminisce.
With the like woman in the wraparound dress look into the moon on the Lido deck.
On the Lido deck. Yes. And like
pining away for the guy. Like she came with some guy, but that really shouldn't be the guy that she ends up with. And she ran into the guy like she probably was friends with him and in high school, but she didn't give him the time of day. But now that there are a few years.
Because he was a nerd.
He was
and
a
now
nerd.
He's not
yeah,
a
it's
nerd.
Different.
Yes.
And frankly, that guy that she came with is treating her pretty poorly.
And frequently, the guy who is the nerd comes to her with a wrap.
Of
course.
Because
it's cold on the Lido deck.
It is so cold with the full moon on the Lido deck.
Exactly. And then there is also always like the hijinks of the staff. So like Isaac, the bartender, and Gopher. And Doc would be like bumbling around.
And
after
Doc
the
was
same
the
girl.
womanizer, which was a little creepy because he was a doctor.
He was a doctor, and he was, they were.
And he was talking about feeling women up while he was giving them exams.
Well, this is a different time.
That doesn't age well.
It doesn't age at all, but we loved it. And,
perfect television.
Meryl Steubing, Captain Steubing and his knee socks, always very special. For the kids out there who don't know what we're talking about, there is such a cornucopia of madness ahead of you. Just go on YouTube and check it out.
I'm going to. I cannot wait to
maybe we need
these.
to have a viewing in the pit.
Yes, of Love Boat and Fantasy Island.
Like do a whole lineup night.
Are you going to talk about Fantasy Island? Is this what you were going to talk about? Okay, sorry. No more tangents.
This is really this is like, I was going to talk about what I'm about to talk about. But no. Like I realized as I was doing this preparation that it was really about the lineup. Like Saturday night lineup was so thrilling. And even if you were at someone's house for a sleepover, there was no question. Like that's what you were watching. That's what you were doing. But if you could stay up and your parents didn't mind, or if there was a TV in your room, then you watched SNL.
Saturday Night Live.
Exactly. The 80s was really like John Belushi was already gone. So the 80s was the second team. It was really the second cast.
Yeah. Which cast are you focusing in on? Are we talking about like when those teen stars?
No.
That was 90s.
No. This is like when
Anthony Michael Hall.
No. That's the 90s. It's
Eddie Murphy.
Yes, it's Eddie Murphy, Joe Piscopo, people you don't remember, like Charles Rocket. It was weird because a lot of them were only on for like a year and then moved on. I remembered how, even as a child, I was aware of how subversive it was. Like it was to even have watched it was considered risque as a child. And we were kids who were watching Channel J.
Right.
So I was like, why is that? And then I realized that it's because of what happened off screen as well as on screen. Right? Are you remembering this? And that there were all kinds of, obviously we all knew about, we didn't all know, but there were drugs and parties and excess and all of that. Do you remember that stuff?
Yeah, I do. But it's so weird. Did I know it at the time? I think so.
Did we? Like, I remember there was and this is, I guess it was this is really a 70s thing, but I remember watching a skit where John Belushi, this is in the late 70s, John Belushi was doing like a news report, and it was about how bad cocaine was, and he was covered in cocaine.
Okay.
And then at the very end, he took out a powdered donut to take a second bite. And that was like, oh my God, it's a cocaine joke.
And honestly, I think I would have gotten that.
Yeah. No, that's my point. We did get it. Like
Yeah.
it was.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so, yes, it was.
When did he die? Oh, you know what? It was in the 80s. And I was looking into doing it, but he died.
Didn't he die in like 82? Like he died early.
In LA, though.
Right. At the Chateau Marmont. Everyone's favorite place to overdose. Yay. So, so I was looking into that, and I was looking at this early cast who people don't really remember. Like, do you remember Brad Kroger?
No. There was another Brad, though.
Brad Hall.
Yes.
Who
I remember
was with
him.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who was also on the show, and they got married and are still married. Yes. So, and a lot of the people on the show at that time were actually the writers who migrated out to being the cast, and then
sort of like The Office.
Yes. Lorne Michaels left the show and handed the reins over to Dick Ebersol for a little while. And I think that was also like part of the whole switch up. But anyway, so I was looking into this, and I was like, you know what? I remember that about this time with Saturday Night Live, but was there anything so risque or crazy really on the air? I was talking to my dad a couple of days ago, and we were talking about the podcast, and he was talking about how entertained he is by it and all that, which is always so nice. And then he was gearing up to say something, and I knew exactly what it was going to be just from his body language and the sort of, clearing of his throat. My father, even more than my mother did it, but my father has been on me my entire life about my dirty mouth, that I have a propensity to curse. And I don't think that I curse more than
me?
Well, our peers.
No, I don't think so. He doesn't like the language on the podcast.
He doesn't mind when I do it in person. I don't know. You know what? I don't know.
So what did he say? I'm interrupting you.
So that was it. No, I said, Dad, don't even start. It's the cursing. And he was like, yes, it's just maybe not the best way to. Well, what I found was that the number one way for someone to get fired on Saturday Night Live was to say fuck.
On the air.
Yes. And it happened so many
nice little
times. Yes. See that? See how I did that? So the number of people who were fired because they said fuck or were banned from the show if they were guests was
it
quite
would
large.
Cost the show lots of money because it was live.
Yes.
And the FEC, right?
FCC.
FEC is like air traffic or something.
Look, the two of us live in a bubble of not knowing. We're just like, life is pretty and I don't know. We don't drive.
No.
Yeah, that's not a joke. Like that whole thing was actually entirely
Neither
accurate.
of us drive.
Funny enough, one of the people who was fired for saying the F word, Dad, was this guy, Charles Rocket. And when we'll put something about him online, but you'll recognize him instantly. Very good looking guy and played a lot of jerks in a lot of things. Yeah. He did a skit because Charlene Tilton was on.
From Dallas.
Yes, this is all connected.
Oh,
so Charlene Tilton, who, that's a whole other conversation about like sex symbols through the ages and how the aesthetic changes, because she was this little tiny petite kind of little Zoftig, busty blonde, not a great beauty for the ages, just like a cute girl next door button nose kind of thing.
She was a sex pot on the show.
She was a sex pot on the show, and she was the end all be all of sexy in that time, the early 80s. But on the show, in the skit, she was having an affair with whoever Charles Rocket was playing.
Okay.
And there's all this stuff.
Well, that's what she did on Dallas too. She had affairs with everybody, even though she was a teenager.
And the joke was that she was having an affair with everyone else in the cast. Okay. Yes. And so everyone was jealous and everyone was going crazy. And then someone comes out and you don't know who it is, and shoots Charles Rocket.
Of course.
Right. And someone says, do you know, or do you want to know who did it? Or do you know who did it? And without thinking, he says, I've never been shot before. Of course I want to fucking know who did it.
Oh, that's
Career
such a good
over.
answer.
Career over. Done.
Oh,
Well, not career
Charles
over, but
Rocket.
bye-bye. No more on this. And as a really weird postscript, and this is more your ball of wax than mine, but in the strange but true category that includes gore, Charles Rocket killed himself
Oh, no.
by cutting his own throat with a box cutter.
Awful.
How crazy is that? Like,
oh, I'll look into it.
you look into it. I think this is for you. I'm
Yeah,
lobbing.
I appreciate it.
I'm
Thank you.
lobbing it to you. And he was found in a field, and it was definitively not murder. Weird.
I will definitely do a follow-up on that.
Very weird. So yeah, so saying fuck was the number one way. My favorite story, and this actually encapsulates what I thought Saturday Night Live and the cast were all about. But apparently this actually really upset them. In 1981, Penelope Spheris, the director, she directed Wayne's World. Anyway, but the thing that she was really, really well known for was this documentary that came out in 1981 about the hard rock scene in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And it was called Decline of Western Civilization. And it showed some really messed up stuff. And John Belushi, who had already left the show, saw the film and was taken with it. And also really taken with this one band called Fear that was highlighted in the film. And he wanted to give them a cameo in a movie that he was shooting, but it didn't work out. So he got in touch with Lorne Michaels and asked if he could get them a guest spot.
Wow.
And Lorne Michaels said no. And he was like, but what if I come on the episode? I'll be in it in some way.
Right.
And he was like, okay, no problem. So little did Lorne Michaels know what he was getting into, because not only did they come to the show, but they brought with them a little bit of their fan base. What happens is one of the most famous, and to use exactly the right language, fuck ups in Saturday Night Live history. So the thing about Fear is that, unlike everyone else in Penelope Spheris' movie, they were not a metal band. This performance in 1981 was basically the day that punk came to America and entered their living rooms, because that's what Fear was. They're a punk band.
Okay.
And John Belushi, knowing who they were and what their whole deal was, got a bunch of kids to come up from Washington, D.C., where there was a really active punk culture, to come up to New York City and slam dance. Remember when,
yes.
like, when was the last time you heard the word slam dance, right? So to come up and do that. So they had maybe 15 people that they were going to have like make up a mosh pit. But little did they know that as the vans were coming north from DC to New York, they started picking up other punk kids.
Oh, God.
So by the time they arrive in New York, there are 4 dozen punks looking for, at minimum, a mosh pit to get crazy in. The country did not know what they were looking at this point, right? The band sets up on stage and they start by antagonizing the crowd, saying, hey, it's great to be in New Jersey. They start playing and the kids instantly swing into a psychotic mosh pit.
Oh, God.
So 4 dozen people slamming. And remember how they used to dance like they were stomping around and flailing, and they would just start beating each other up. And it was. I
mean, there's a way to safely do it, I believe, but it doesn't sound like this kind of crowd was into the safety of it all.
No. And in fact, there were people in the crowd, in the mosh pit, who were really big in the punk scene themselves. There was, Ian MacKaye from Minor Threat, Tesco V from the Meat Men, John Brannon from Negative Approach, and Harley Flanagan and John Joseph from the Cro-Mags. So these guys were definitely part of pushing the envelope, right? So they're all going totally berserk. The cameramen and Dick Ebersol, who is the stage manager at this point, they've never seen this before. They think there is an actual riot happening on the set, on the stage. And so they start freaking out and they try to corral the kids. The kids won't move. It is now an actual screaming fight with Fear still playing.
Oh God!
I'm sure
can
the stage
you see
manager,
this on TV?
You can absolutely see it now on YouTube because Saturday Night Live tried to make it to disappear.
I can imagine,
and obviously the East Coast saw it. I don't know if they cut it for the West Coast, which would have been interesting. Yeah, it was never put into rotation into any of the syndication. They later estimated that and think it was 1981, $20,000 worth of damage to the studio. And later on, when interviewed, the lead singer of Fear said that it was more like $500,000, but who knows if that was just grandstanding. And the thing, to get back to the original point of what is the worst thing you can do on Saturday Night Live, after all of this chaos, baiting the crowd with welcome, we love New Jersey. And there was a song called something like be in New York if you love saxophones, like all kinds of nonsense. The thing that got them banned for life was at the very end, someone came and grabbed the mic, and it wasn't even a member of the band. It was one of the other punk guys from a different band who came on and said, New York fucking sucks. And that was it. That was what actually was the final blow for them. Anarchy was less an issue than the F word. Anyway, wild. So that is one of my favorite Saturday Night Live. See, I've been poisoned by the young people.
Let's take it back.
It's one of my
Saturday Night Live.
Saturday Night Live.
We have the energy
stories
to say the entire phrase.
And I think that one of the next things I'd like to research is there were some very notorious cast parties because, on Saturday night, they would wrap for the week. And then there was one particular bar that they all went to that was right near the studio. I know that there are some very, very freaky stories out there about those cast parties. So that is my next research.
Next time. So what's our tie-in? Griffin Dunne, Ric Ocasek, Paulina Porskova.
Pranks. So they pulled a prank and John Belushi, and I don't know if it was really a prank, but they got one over on the Saturday Night Live executives for sure.
All right. That works for me.
I think it's a prank.
Cool. All right. Till next time. Thank you, Jessica.
À demain.